Hi everyone, and welcome to another 10th edition rule announcement roundup with, of course, an Astra Militarum overlay if possible. Since last Monday 17th, there's been 3 articles looking at several areas of the new rule set. So let's start off with the relevant number of phases that'll be per battle round. In 9th edition, there are currently 7 phases, and in 10th there'll be a reduced 5, with the psychic and morale phase no longer existing independently. As explored in a previous video, the psychic phase will be sprinkled into the other phases with, for example, psychic spells that affect shooting happening in the shooting phase, or those affecting the fight phase happening in the fight phase. Now, how those will be activated is shared via a Space Marine Librarian datasheet and also an Orc Weird Boy. Looking at these in isolation, there actually are some pretty big changes to how spells are performed, with a smite being essentially a shooting attack with a longer 24-inch range, D6 shots, hitting on a 3+ at strength 5 AP1 and D3 damage. There is no mention of having to roll 2 D6 like we do in 9th edition, and also the concept of mortal wounds is gone, so the target can roll their saving throw against the smite. Smite will actually have 2 profiles, with focused witchfire being improved strength 6 AP2, inflicting devastating wounds and carrying the keyword hazardous. Hazardous is probably achieving what Perils of the Warp currently does, and I assume rolling on 1s will activate that rule. Now, what we don't know is whether this example of Smite is what all Psychic characters will have, and I say this is probably a significant downgrade in effectiveness of Smite, given it currently inflicts up to D3 wounds that ignore the wound and saving throw, moving to something that needs to roll both of these in order to inflict damage. Also, the Librarian example has no mention of being able to deny enemy psycho abilities, nor knowing abilities and able to cast a number of those abilities. The Librarian does, however, also have an additional rules that if attacked and attached to a unit, it gets a 4+ feel no pain against psychic attacks, and also grants them sustain hits 1 ability, which we know from a previous article is exploding 6s to hit, or in other words, 6s to hit generate an additional hit, which when lumped with storm bolters or the 3 attacks Tornado will have, will be a real force multiplier. A crucial point in this rules is that they are only granted if the Librarian leads a unit. So if he is on his own, he won't get these rules. The Orc Weird Boy example is very different to the Terminator. We have no mention of a smite on the datasheet, instead knowing a shooting ability called Edbanger, which grows in power if he's leading a unit. Some interesting elements here is that he gets a rule called Precision, and also an additional rule called Deadly Demise D3. I assume Precision allows it to target characters or something similar, and Deadly Demise is a nastier version of Perils of the Warp, where it explodes and kills surrounding models. The fact that Orc has this, whilst the Librarian doesn't, points to some real variability for the Orc character, which on the face of it makes me think he may not be used a whole lot in competitive tournament lists. Of course, we don't yet know what the unit cost of these models will be, and likewise the wider army rules, but on the face of it, it looks like Cycles have a lot less option they do in 9th edition. Of course, we'll need to see what Psychic specialists like Grey Knights and Thousand Suns will have. Now on to morale. This will be done in the command phase, with the battle shock test triggered if a unit is below its half strength, or a single model unit is below half its starting wounds. The second element is clearly quite big and is explored in the smaller print of the article, and for a lot of units which currently never partake in the morale phase, for example the majority of vehicles or characters, this is a real new inclusion. Failing a battle shock test will have wider impact on the unit's abilities, meaning it can't hold objectives, needs to conduct a desperate escape test if trying to fall back, and that unit can't use stratagems. We don't yet know what a desperate escape test is, but the impact of the first and third point is huge. I'd say in later stages of the game, this will really hurt if a unit still can't hold an objective but can continue to shoot and fight. This could make a unit essentially useless, and it could change the current thinking of ensuring a unit is completely destroyed through target priority to being somewhat okay if a unit has not been destroyed but is at least below half strength, and introducing variability into your opponent's plan. I do look forward to see what our commissars have for this, hopefully allowing us to ignore something like the battle shock test. Moving on to the third and last article is some new rules about transports. Firstly, a change to all transports is that those embarked units on board can debus after the vehicle has moved, as long as the vehicle hasn't advanced or fallen back, and those that have debused can't charge. This is going to be a real shake-up to the game, with a humble Chimera unit with some Cadian shock inside now essentially having a 21-inch move, thanks to the Chimera's 12-inch move, assumed 3-inch debus, and the 6-inch move from the troops inside, all happening in one turn. This would allow some early game move blocking and really award any mechanised players. Another new rule is the firing deck rule, which allows embark units to shoot from the transport. The article gives example of a Chimera having a firing deck 2 profile, so your 2 special weapon troops in your Cadian shot can shoot out of the Chimera. Also detailed is that the troops inside benefit from any abilities the transport is affected by, so perhaps mechanised orders would affect the 2 troopers shooting out. A quick hobby point here is that I think this gives real option and opportunity to have the top troop hatch of a Chimera opened up and 2 models hanging out shooting out of the vehicle, which would look super cool. Also shared are 4 vehicles and their additional rules, with the Chimera retaining its mobile command vehicle ability, a Spaceman Repulsor having detail being able to take 12 Space Marines, 6 Jump Pack, Wolf and Gravis Automators or 4 Centurions, and an Eldar Falcon grants reroll wound rolls for a debus troops if they target an enemy unit that was targeted by the Falcon. It also shows off our glorious Taurox Armoured Taxi, which can advance and the troops inside can still debus, so further boosting the range of our Astra Militarum mechanised forces. Also mentioned lastly is that Land Raiders will have an assault ramp rule, allowing a unit inside to debus and charge, which could be very, very spicy. This feels like quite a big change to the game, and reviving a lot of transport units that don't see much play in 9th edition. Okay, the next article looks at the new terrain rules. The article starts off with an important new detail, where a unit with a 3+ or better save can't benefit from cover if targeted by an AP0 weapon. Now, saying this a little bit out loud, it could be a bit confusing. Against an AP1 weapon, they'll be getting the benefits of cover, so saving on a 3+, and against an AP2 weapon, they're getting a 4+, given they got the benefit of cover, so a 2+, but then pushed up to a 4+, thanks to the AP2. That aside, I think this is a great, as it could mean our humble lasgun can now actually have a chance of digging out some Space Marines that are in cover. Also explained is the simplicity of the terrain rules for 10th edition, with GW admitting that the 9th edition rules are overly complicated with 12 different terrain traits and 4 different categories. I can remember back a few years ago when 9th edition was being previewed, and the idea behind this complexity was to make the tabletop highly immersive as units move across different terrain types. I know from experience that only a handful of the terrain rules are actually used, with me never seeing, for example, a terrain piece that has unstable position or exposed position, and rarely I've seen those with heavy cover. 10th edition moved to 6 terrain types, and these will all simply give you the benefits of cover, so a +1 armor save. The 6 terrain types are craters and rubble, which benefit infantry models only, barricades and fuel pipes, and have got a particular rule for charging and a straightforward ruling for getting the benefits of cover, battlefield debris and hills and steel structures, also having a straightforward ruling, woods, which is a little bit more complex but still straightforward, and finally ruins, which works with a similar principle. Ruins will have a new additional rule called plunging fire, where a unit shooting from 6 inches above vertically down to a target on ground level has an improved AP1. Plunging fire is a modern military term that I heard of during my time in the Australian Army in the infantry, where you would fire a long-range machine gun onto a target and maximise the range of the machine gun by using elevation, and the rounds essentially fall onto the target. A watch out here from a 40k point of view is a 6-inch terrain piece is actually quite tall, and a standard infantry move of just 6 inches means I would spend a full turn to get onto the top of the terrain piece, but still very, very cool to see this included. So overall for a terrain, I'd say that the rules are looking a lot easier to navigate, but we need to see the wider rule set to understand if it is truly simpler, but also with the required clarity. I personally found the terrain rules of 9th edition to be a less enjoyable aspect of the game, Always been puzzled why a model will get terrain benefits if simply towing an objective, whilst the shooting unit is standing right in front of them, but of course we'll need to see. Right, so hopefully helpful, a good roundup of the last 7 days of the 10th edition rule announcements. Let me know what you think in the comments. And if you enjoyed it and want to support me, you can do so with a like, comment, or by subscribing, watching any of my other YouTube videos where I cover hobby tactics law Astra Militarum, or joining my Patreon platoon. And massive thanks to my current supporters. Let's get your bayonet sharp, lights gun oiled, faith for the Emperor strong, Patreon platoon, sound off. Tank Commander Glenn, Tank Commander Watchdog Van Etten, Tank Commander Mitchell, Colour Sergeant DuPont, Sergeants Adal, the Colonel Merrill, Veteran Gibson, Hall, Lundeen, Guardsman Beard, Coquelin, Flint, Hills, Malik, Nitton, Nguyen, Smith, Tom, Tompkin, Conscript England, Gilliam, Goodwin.